Well, continuing on with the Christmas movies, I felt like it's time that we need to start talking about the Santa Claus movies because this is an example of things you if you're gonna do sequels, you need to do them right. This is a perfect example of what happens when you don't. Now, the original Santa Claus came out in 1994. Hope I'm correct on that. 1994 for the Christmas holiday season was a huge hit. Disney was not expecting much out of this movie. To be honest with you, it was a very, very, very small budget. Whatever budget that was in this movie ended up going towards effects, and you can also see that because Tim Allen at the time was not a movie star. He was actually just a TV star. Disney wanted to make something that would be a star vehicle for him to put him into the movies, and so with Disney also making Home Improvement, they wanted to do something that would send him into movie star status. And the Santa Claus was that movie. It was this little bitty movie that it didn't come out of nowhere, but it came at a time that they just began to, Disney was in a streak of hits, and so Disney wanted to make a Christmas movie. And they began to think about, what are some of the most popular Christmas movies of all time? Well, they began to think about Miracle on 34th Street. And think about how iconic that was when when that came out. And of course, I'll get into Miracle on 34th Street here in a little bit. But yeah, the Santa Claus. It's a great story. Great little magical piece. It doesn't have anything in terms of like. It just has this charm and this warmth and this heart to it. Even though it lacks in special effects, like I understand, it was the mid '90s, so CGI was something that was fairly new, but they didn't have much to work with, and what budget that they did have did go to special effects. And matter of fact, the bodysuit that Tim Allen wears consumed a big portion of the budget. And of course, there's a big biography documentary about the making of the Santa Claus, where like they reveal that Tim Allen was not very comfortable in the makeup and in the fat suit, and he at one point did go on a tirade, profanity-laced tirade, and of course the children in the film play elves, and he happened to do it at the worst possible time. So yeah, but it has so much heart to it, and it's just so wonderfully made movie that it's taken its place amongst the great Christmas films. I see this all the time, amongst films like Miracle on 34th Street and It's a Wonderful Life and Home Alone, and so on and so forth. Then we get into the sequels. Yeah, I did have to complete them, but the Santa Claus 2, we'll get into that. The movie does continue on in the story with Scott Calvin, um, Tim Allen's character, as the Santa Claus. And the film goes south from there. Obviously, Disney this time around gave them a bigger budget, so they have bigger sets, bigger special effects, and that's about it. Yeah. The story is not much to brag about. It lacks, like I said, how the first one had so much heart behind it. It was just so positive, and it had, you actually felt about the characters, and and you laughed at the things that happened to the character. Once here's this man who's transforming into the Santa Claus, everything from his attitude to his body, and how how it's changing. And then the Santa Claus 2, it just not much there. It's just that, okay, we're going to put all that stuff from the first movie, we're going to put it in jeopardy now. It was just, I saw that one in the theater. I did not see the original Santa Claus in the theater. Why? Because we never got around to it. But the Santa Claus 2 I did see in the theater, and I punished my dad so bad. I said, this was a terrible movie. It was really, really bad. And just the fact that I think they could have done so much more with the premise. Instead, they create double jeopardy, and it's on stuff that's one thing you do kind of care about, but the other thing was, okay, what was the point? The jeopardy was, the big conflict of the film is that if Santa Claus does not find a Mrs. Claus by midnight on Christmas Eve, he will forfeit his ability to be Santa Claus, return back to being Scott Calvin, and there will be no Santa Claus. And then the other conflict was that when the real Santa Claus leaves, the seat has to be occupied. And the thing about that doesn't kind of make any sense. And so they create a toy Santa replica to fill the position, and he becomes a dictator and just consumes the hot chocolate and is just terrible. And even tries to take the sleigh and to be the new Santa Claus, basically. And yeah, it's just terrible. And the third one's not much better. Come on. But there is a tie-in here between the second and the third one, because remember, in the first one it's just Santa Claus. It's just this man who's transformed himself into Santa Claus. There's this magical power that's transformed him into Santa Claus. But by the time you get to the sequels, like I said, bigger budget, bigger special effects, and so on and so forth. And when that happened, they brought in the other characters, like the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, Mother Nature, the like St. Patrick's Day, and yeah, they brought in all those characters. So when the third one comes around, we meet Jack Frost, played by Martin Short. And of course, they resolve the conflict from part 2 in which he found Mrs. Claus. Well, in part 3, Mrs. Claus is going to have a baby. Okay. And that's where the most of the jokes lie, it seems like. That the fact that Mrs. Claus can't tell the difference between contractions and gas. Which I'm pretty sure pregnant women would understand what that feels like. But it just became this running, like false alarm, it's just indigestion or something like that. And then the main conflict is that Jack Frost goes back in time. They go back in time to the original movie and he prevents Scott Calvin from actually putting on the Santa suit. And thus they have to stop Jack Frost from destroying Christmas. Yeah. What started off as a great idea segues into bigger budgets, but less interesting stuff. No heart or soul. What is wrong with these people? I think they should have gotten the original director back. I think that was a big thing behind it. John Pasquin. John Pasquin was a director for Home Improvement. And matter of fact, that's the guy that Tim Allen was really pushing to direct this thing. Because he felt that John Pasquin was a very, very good director and could do the job. For Santa Claus 2 and Santa Claus 3, we have Michael Lembeck as the director. And I will give this to the sequels. I do think that the effects did somewhat improve. And with a bigger budget, that they were able to do a little bit more visual effects and special effects wise than the other film. But where was the heart and soul in the sequels? They were gone. This one lacked a budget, yet it had so much heart and soul in it. Come on, guys. What are you doing here? But it is a favorite that gets played every single year since the original movie in 1994. I can't, just that these two were just so bad. I think it ruins the whole series. But you cannot replace this one, the original. Again, so much heart, and you think that it was just going to be this huge comedy, and it actually is a comedy. It's kind of funny to see what this guy's going through, but by the end, it had tender moments. because it was also a father and son story. That, it was actually the son who said, Dad, put the suit on. You know, and it was just a blast. But I felt that the heart and soul kind of got lost by the sequels, and it became all about the special effects and the budget. And but my thing is, and I've always kind of believed this, and that is, just because you have a big budget and you can do all the special effects, but those are nothing compared to what a good story is. And here, there just wasn't a really good story. I think part two does have an interesting conflict. You got to find Mrs. Claus. Great, wonderful, but there is so much more you could have done with that. So much better things that you could have done with that. But other than that, it just fell flat. I mean, it was just flat. And same with the Santa Claus 3. It was just pure flat. And you have the Mrs. Claus now. And yeah, she's 8-9 months pregnant. But yeah, what are you doing with her? But that concludes this one of the Santa Claus. I think now we're about ready to get into the John Hughes movies. Actually, there is one more I would like to talk about that would tie into the John Hughes movies. But from me to you, see you later.